have a conversation about Miss Amy Jones Kerr. And the conversation was that students were very concerned about this individual who had just been hired in Healdsburg as the new principal at the high school. And information came to us, and a petition came to this reporter to please look into allegations of racism, discrimination, and more than anything, tolerance of racism in the Roseland School District. The local newspaper came out at some point and said that Ms. Amy Jones Kerr had left the district mid-year in the middle of a pandemic. And then later on, we found out that she had just been hired in Healdsburg to be the new principal. And once I started looking into this, and there were some questions that I had, I sent some questions to the superintendent, and I engaged with some parents and students of Healdsburg. I started looking at some students and previous students of Roseland. And so I want to start tonight by doing part 2 of this and talking briefly about Roseland. There have been allegations, again, by former students as to the high level of racism and discrimination that happens in the district, and the fact that those who use racist language do not get punished. And so one of the things that I looked into was the number of the population. So I asked for some data from the current administrator, and I realized somebody is taking over now, but I asked for some documentation. That information, then I got a response that said, we will get it to you by Friday or Tuesday. Then I never got it. I sent a follow-up email. They said they had sent it to me, and then they sent me some responses. Some were appropriate, some basically just directed me to websites to look at the information for myself. I want to clarify to you that you and I, me as a member of the press and you as members of the community, you have the same access as I do. And you can do a request for information from any public institution that receives public funds. So if you want to take this further, you're welcome to do so. There's certain information that is considered privilege, but there's a lot of information that's considered public. So I was a little bit disappointed, I have to be honest, with the fact that they didn't give me the information until I asked for it yesterday. And then what they gave me was limited. Then I asked one more question, they got back to me today, but I still don't have all the data. So again, the goal here is to be as transparent as possible. And so when I asked, one of the items that I asked for was the amount of money that each employee was getting paid for the years 2018, 2019, 2020. That was one of the ones that I gotta go look it up yourself. And it's like, that's not what I asked for, right? If you were not gonna provide it to me to begin with, you could have said it in your original response, but you didn't. So again, it's important that we look at this, and I will send another follow-up, and I am gonna ask for them to do the work because that's how it should be. Now, the student population of Roseland now, the whole district, is 94.1% Latinx. And the white student population is 2.4%. So I want you to keep those numbers in mind as we continue this conversation. So you have 94.1 Latinx and 2.4 of the population of students is white. Yet, when I asked for the information about the student faculty comparison, I found out that in the whole district, they for Roseland, they only have 20 teachers who are Latinx. 94% Latinx students, many of them monolingual when they first start in the district, and 20 teachers who are Latinx. There's no guarantee that they are all bilingual just by the fact that they're Latinx, but that's something I want you to keep in mind. Because the rest of the students in the school district of Roseland, 109 of them are white. And according to some of the reports, they are not bilingual. And there is no clarification that they have received the training to understand the diverse Latinx cultures from which all these children come from. So how is it that you have 94.1% Latinx and only 20 teachers who are Latinx, but you have 109, right, individuals who are teachers who are white? Somebody needs to give us that information. Interestingly enough, though, when you look at the people who work in the front office, most of them are Latinx. So then that takes us to the point of saying, are we suggesting then that administrators, this is still during the time that Ms. Amy Jones Kerr was the superintendent, are we suggesting that Latinx were good enough to work in the front office, to clean the toilets and everything else, but they were not enough teachers who were willing to teach there, who were Latinx? That is one of the questions. Are there not enough administrators who are trained to be administrators, who are Latinx, who maybe understand the cultural values, norms, and beliefs of this community that they're serving? And I ask that because when you look at the data for 2018, 2019 in administrators, there are literally 4 administrators in that school. One is somebody who works in the district office. Somebody else is one person who is an administrator at Roseland Elementary, and then 2 work at Roseland Charter. But how many white administrators do you have? Well, that is simple. You have 16 white administrators in a place where the population is 94.1% Latinx. And again, how many of these people are bilingual so that they can communicate concerns with the parents? Well, that is important to ask as well, because when we look at, this is another data point that I asked where I said, how many of your children are English language learners who are at risk of becoming long-term English language learners, and how many of them are already long-term learners? So what does that mean? At risk means that they are on their 4th or 5th year listed as English language learners. Long-term learners are those who are in their 6th year listed as English language learners or more, 6 or more years. The problem with this, the research says that if you reach your 6th year and you haven't been reclassified as fluent in English, then the likelihood that you're going to graduate high school diminishes very much. And I didn't have the opportunity to bring an expert to explain to us the consequences, but the consequences are very high. Basically, if you end up as a long-term English language learner, then you are likely to not graduate high school. And as a result of that, you are going to have a difficulty going to college or making enough money to provide for your future family. So what do we know? We know that in the K-12 system of Roseland, which is not that large of a system, but they have 162 kids that were 4 to 5 years as English language learners, which means at risk of becoming long-term English language learners. And they have 159 who are already long-term learners. So you have 159, and what is being done to support those children? Those are some of the many questions that need to be answered, and yet, so far, we're not getting those answers. Now, during this process of investigating a little bit more about the allegations, a confidential source came to me and shared a document which says Superintendent Evaluation 2020-2021 for Ms. Amy Jones Kerr. And this documentation was again provided to me by a confidential source that I am bound to protect. That is my job as a reporter. And so I shared this evaluation with the district of Healdsburg, the board, and I share it with the superintendent. I asked for feedback. They gave me we're gonna look into it. And then again, at some point, I'm gonna reach out to Roseland for further details. I also share it on the net because there was a dialogue in regards to, is there any truth to these allegations? Okay. And the evaluation says, and I'm just going to mention a couple of points here because you can go and look at it at DACA Sonoma County, and it says, Ms. Kerr has asked the board to expand the number of staff people who we contacted to support or evaluation of her job performance. Will it comply with her request, and our findings were supported by multiple employees of the Roseland School District. One, the nonprofit status of the Roseland Foundation was allowed to lapse not once but twice through lack of oversight. This still has not been resolved and had the potential to greatly harm the financial security of the charter district, as well as others involved in the sale of the Ursuline property. The new hire CBO was given very little superintendent support and had to resort to working along evenings and weekends. This individual eventually left. A part-time administrative assistant was assigned full-time workload and was left with no time to complete the assignments. And again, this individual resigned. And then it says that Ms. Kerr attempted to disenfranchise longtime employee blank, we are trying to protect certain names, of any job protections she had earned in 18 years of employment with the district. And there's a couple other points, but the one I want to mention here is number 7, a toxic atmosphere of gossip, favoritism, threats, and fear was fostered by the superintendent. Many employees were afraid to speak out, fearing that their careers would be ruined by negativity spread by the superintendent. Now, I posted that, and interestingly enough, what I have seen is some positive feedback, some people who believe that what I'm saying, what I'm sharing is true. But I found it very interesting that an administrator from one school district, an individual that I have met personally before and have interacted with, have worked on different projects with years ago, came out to question the validity of the item. And that, before I move to the next piece, I have to leave you with this. Is this administrator commenting because he really believed that the item is not true, or are administrators worried that if somebody was willing to leak this document to this reporter, that other documents about some of these other administrators in other districts will be leaked and will demonstrate that they are also not carrying out their duties? And that I leave to you to figure out. I also want to remind you that Roseland is going to have their next school board, charter school board meeting, and that is going to happen on June 15th at 4:30 in the afternoon. And former students want you to join and listen and participate again to talk about, they want the district to acknowledge their pain, the issues of discrimination, and for the district to address how they plan to, again, do something about it. And now, moving to Healdsburg, what happened here was, again, that Ms. Jones Kerr was given the job. And so parents and students reach out to this reporter and ask for me to look into how was that decision made? Why was there no transparency when, again, in the middle of this process, there was an article in the newspaper that brought up a lot of questions. Why was this person given the job? I sent a request for comments from the superintendent. He responded. I shared them last week with you. You can refer to the video I have on my YouTube channel, Líderes del Futuro. And I also sent a message to the board, and the president of the board said they would look into it, but no deadlines, no more details. Some of the questions that I was given by the superintendent were kind of fuzzy, as I like to call it, not very clear, very like to the point, but not giving you enough detail. And just a few minutes ago, I got a copy of an email that the superintendent sent to only a few people that now those individuals have asked him to send to all parents. And so the email says, I wanted to let you know, because I sent another request for comment from the superintendent and I haven't gotten it. And it says, I wanted to let you know earlier this week, we began an independent investigation of the allegations that we were presented with last week regarding Roseland schools. We will continue to keep our students' safety and well-being as our highest priority. And we really would like Ms. Jones Kerr to start in a position of trust and collaboration with our students, parents, and community. If the investigation does reveal issues, they will, of course, be addressed. Not sure what that means. I also wanted to highlight some areas where our commitment to equity, anti-racism, and student and parent voice is highlighted. After several board trainings on equity and ethnic studies led by Acosta Educational Partnership, our school board recently drafted new board policies on equity and anti-racism. We continue to refine them and are hoping to have them be formally approved in June or August. Once policies are approved, we will move to draft administrative regulations, which are similar to an ongoing plan for equity and anti-racism. This work will begin in the fall. And then it continues to say that 24 individuals, employees of the Healdsburg Unified School District have already received 1 semester worth of training on ethnic studies, and that the contract will continue for another year. And then the last comment he makes is that Healdsburg High School administration is planning to convene a student equity group to discuss issues of equity and needed change on an ongoing basis. Now, my comment to that is what parents share as a concern. And the concern, and I shared it with you last week, for those of you who tune in, is that during that parent meeting that they had last Thursday, while I was having my show, and that's why I couldn't show up, the principal kept pointing out, or actually it was 2 weeks ago, the superintendent kept pointing to one student who couldn't make it to the show for the same reason many other individuals don't want to make it to the show, to have a discussion about their feelings on this issue, and that is for fear. But the superintendent kept mentioning the name of this individual as the one who started the petition that made this individual very uncomfortable. When I asked for comment on that, he said he was only mentioning it because he wanted to highlight that he was very proud of the involvement of students. The community saw it as a form of intimidation. And I want to remind you that that petition continues to be available on my Facebook page, DACA Sonoma County, if you want to check it out later on. And if you want to sign, it's up to you. And the last thing I will mention here is a comment that we got. I reached out to Ariel Kelly, who is in the City Council of Healdsburg, and I asked her for comment, and this will be, this is her response. As a member of the Healdsburg City Council, I have been hearing from concerned parents, students, and teachers about the hiring of the new Healdsburg High School principal. While our City Council does not oversee decisions of the school district, the health of our schools and public trust in our school district is critically important to the vitality of our city. The superintendent's decision to hire Ms. Jones Kerr subsequent to her mid-year resignation in Roseland, which occurred during a highly visible racial reckoning among students, staff, and parents in the Roseland district, has raised a lot of questions in Healdsburg about whether appropriate levels of transparency and community engagement occurred prior to her being hired. The hiring of an administrator rests with the superintendent. That said, efforts to mitigate the community's concern by conducting meaningful engagement and creating concrete plans to ensure transparency and prevent further erosion of trust in our school district have not occurred. There is a huge opportunity here to solidify the district's commitment to equity, not just in words, but in practice. We have struggled to engage in culturally responsive teaching and have been unable to build a pipeline for bilingual and bicultural residents to become educators and administrators. Those are two areas that have been highlighted as problematic in both Roseland and Healdsburg in the past. And there is no time like the present to build that roadmap and respectfully urge accountability for our administrators to deliver on it. I'm grateful for the opportunity from Ms. Ariel Kelly, a member of the City Council of Healdsburg, for her comment. And it is a long comment, but I guarantee to her that I would read it completely. And so I leave you with that for now. I will continue to look a little bit more into it. There is, again, some information that suggests that Ms. Jones Kerr, when she was again in her position at Roseland, that a family member went from earning a small amount of money and then move up to a higher amount and eventually was earning almost double or more than double. And the question then becomes, at what point do school districts have a responsibility, do administrators, do board members have a responsibility to look deeply into these situations? Charter schools have certain ways of bypassing certain rules. And at some point we have to ask ourselves as well, are charter schools what is best for your tax dollars this day and age? So I leave you with that for today.